That looks straightforward enough, but what I've got growing in this bucket might actually surprise you. Guten gardening, everybody. You know, sometimes we save potatoes, and I think a lot of gardeners do this, save potatoes from one crop to be planted again the next season. But what often happens is either you don't have a great space to preserve them, or you know, maybe the dormancy period for those potatoes isn't as long as you need from one season to the next, and you end up getting some potatoes that are way oversprouted. Now, if you have those oversprouted potatoes, there are a couple of questions that typically come to mind. One, can I actually still use them? Can I grow with them? Are they going to be okay? And I'll tell you from our experience, and we did an experiment with some really old fingerling potatoes. They were definitely oversprouted when we planted them. We laid them sideways. We put them into some containers, and we grew some fingerling potatoes from them. So we were able to still use them, to still plant, to still grow with them. Now, were they as vigorous of producers as they might have been if they hadn't oversprouted, if they had been a little bit better preserved? I don't think so. But that being said, we're still able to grow with them. So if you research online, oftentimes the answer you'll see is, yeah, just plant them sideways, let them grow, and they'll be okay. But we wanted to learn a little bit more about those oversprouted potatoes. For example, if I have an oversprouted potato and I remove that sprout, what happens to the seed potato itself? Now, we know that whenever we have a bigger seed potato and we want to cut it apart so we can turn it into multiple pieces, we do that a couple of weeks before planting to give those seed potatoes time to create a nice scab so we don't have any damage to the potatoes. And the potatoes are just fine when it comes time to planting. So it would seem like removing one of those sprouts shouldn't have any real negative impact. So the first thing I want to do in this video is to take a couple of those oversprouted potatoes, show you what I did with removing the sprout and what I did with those sprouts, and then I'll show you the results from a couple of weeks later, which is actually today. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the initial video where I set this up.
So I've got 5 oversprouted seed potatoes here from last year's harvest, and I want to experiment with something. You know, we've done some planting with these that have gone way beyond where we want them to be in the past in terms of sprouting. But I'm trying to determine, you know, we've said just plant them sideways or plant them nice and deep. You know, whatever it takes, you can still grow these. But I want to see what happens. This is a Sharpo mirror here. If I remove this growth, I want to see if we'll develop new growth, or you know what'll happen here at the eye. I've done a little bit of reading about this, and I want to see if I'm very gentle. You see, I'm trying to be very gentle, not really creating too much of a wound here, but I want to see what happens to these seed potatoes if I remove what is already developed. So I'm going to have just these 5 potatoes for now, and then hopefully be able to plant them in the future. And I'm going to put these into a box just like this. Just a box down here, and I'm going to leave them exactly in this position to see what happens. Now I can already see a little bit of growth here from this one and some other eyes, but I'm wondering if this is the best method, or if this is a method that'll work. And again, I'm really interested to see what happens to the spots where I've pulled this off. So you'll see this video one way or the other, regardless of what happens.
Now, I made sure to try to keep those potatoes in the same spot, and you'll hear me address that here in this next clip, where I go ahead and check out the results of what happened a couple weeks later and what those potatoes look like. All right, it's been just about 2.5 weeks since I came in here and removed those sprouts. And what I notice here is, I mean, the potatoes themselves, and I kept them in the same place, or tried to keep them in the same place as when I initially did this recording, so you can see they're the same potatoes. The potatoes themselves didn't suffer any ill effect. I mean, just like the fact that you cut your potatoes whenever you're trying to get more pieces out of the bigger potatoes, removing a piece, and there's where I removed that sprout, removing a piece, as long as you're careful, shouldn't actually damage the potato as a whole. Now, is it going to regrow in that spot? Well, that doesn't look like that's going to happen. At least it didn't happen for any of these potatoes. You can just see where it's kind of, there you go. Here's the This would be the purple magic molly potato. You can see where the other one was. But what we notice then is that the other sprouts are chitting just fine. And now we're at a point where we're almost ready to plant these anyway. And here, let's take a look at this one. I've got plenty of eyes on here still. So it didn't negatively impact these potatoes at all. Okay, so clearly pulling off a sprout from these oversprouted potatoes doesn't cause a problem. The potato itself, the seed potato, is just fine. The sprout definitely doesn't seem to grow back, or at least in the short period of time that we've had them off, it doesn't seem like it's going to grow back, so that's good to know. Now, one thing to consider with this, and I think this is important to think about, not all potatoes have the same number of eyes, so it's possible that some of these seed potatoes are only going to produce a couple of sprouts, and some of them have way more. So removing one sprout from one potato, whether or not you think it's necessary, removing even a single sprout might be a problem for some varieties, whereas other varieties, have plenty more eyes. And you can see that in the ones that I looked at here, that some of these have so many more eyes that are coming up, so you know that they're going to have plenty when it comes time for planting. So that's one thing to consider. But the second thing to consider here, and this is where I'm super interested in what happens next, because the first part of the experiment would be, or was, what would happen to these potatoes. But now I'm curious, because I just decided to take those sprouts and put them into a bucket to see what would happen. To be honest, I thought they would probably just die, wither up and die. But that's not what happened. Let's take a look at our bucket of sprouts.
I'm interested to see, what happens here, because I've never really done anything by pulling one of these off, but I'm going to plant this. I'm going to plant all these. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to dig down to the bottom of this bucket and place each of these so that just the end is sticking out. And I'll give it a little bit of a watering here. Let me get this one deeper.
Now you see in the footage where I take the sprouts that I pulled off of those potatoes and I put them directly into the white bucket. You saw that happen, and that's important because I just wanted to see what would happen. No seed potato at all, just a sprout if I plant them. And here you can see the results so far. I think this is the purple magic molly that doesn't seem like it's done much, although there's still some greenery right there. You can see it right here. I don't think it's dead, but the other ones have actually started to get greenery on them. Now, 4 potatoes in a bucket this size, it's a 3-gallon bucket. No, actually, this is a 4-gallon bucket, but 4 potatoes in here, that's a lot for this space. But I'm interested to see what's going to happen with these potatoes. Again, there's no mother potato here. This is just, I took them, I put the sprout down in the soil, and I watered them a little bit, and this is what's happening. So now I'm going to move these outside. So now it looks to me like the next couple of days are going to be pretty warm, and I actually think that if I were guessing, I would say that our cold days are beyond us here in Zone 5, Wisconsin, but I'm going to keep an eye for sure on the forecast. But if those cool days are behind us, I might be able to get these and leave these outside now going forward. I'm actually going to start them out up on my porch so that I can acclimate them a little bit to the outside weather. But we're supposed to get some more rain, and I'd love to get some rainwater and some of that natural sunlight on these sprouts to see what happens next. Again, I'm not sure that this particular sprout, the only one that's really not coming up yet, I'm not sure that it's dead. It looks to me like it's about to start sprouting. I have no idea what we're going to get as far as results here. I've never actually planted a potato sprout like this. What I have done is I've taken what we would call the suckers of the potato plant, and I've done some potato experiments where we've grown potatoes from potato suckers, and we've gotten some small potatoes that way. But I am fascinated, looks like I broke a leaf here. I am fascinated to see what's going to happen with these. And I want it to happen outdoors to give it the best chance of producing something. So I will definitely have a follow-up video to this video where we take a look and see. I'll try to track this as the months go on, but try to see how these potatoes do. I mean, my next step here is going to be to hill these up a little bit once I see that they're definitely taking off. But who knows? Now, if you've done this before, if you've pulled a sprout off of a plant and planted it like this, off of a potato, I should say, and planted it like this, we'd love to know what your results were. You know, we love experimenting with potatoes around here, and to me, this looks like it's going to be another fun experiment. Well, folks, if you've watched the video to this point, we want to say a big thank you to all of you for being a part of our community, and we'd like to ask you a question. We have, I would say, 13 or 14 different varieties of potatoes we're growing this season, so many different varieties out there. And we plan to do a couple of different experiments. We have a lot that we'd like to do, but we'd like to hear from you. What is a potato-related question you've always wanted to have answered, or just something you've been curious about that maybe we could experiment around with and try to answer for you? I mean, this type of thing, this type of experiment is, I think, at the forefront of people's minds when it comes to planting their seed potatoes, because so often we see those oversprouted potatoes, especially if you're saving your own. And so we want to see what we can do with them to be as productive as possible. So hopefully, at least the beginning of this video answered some of the questions about what happens to your potatoes if you remove a sprout, and what you can do with those seed potatoes if they're oversprouted. And now we're going to try to answer another question that you might not have even known you had, which is what happens when you plant one of those sprouts. Hey, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.